Good evening, everyone. It is January 9th. We're here for a work session of the City Council and are going to begin with public comments on non-agenda items. So any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any item not on our agenda is welcome to come forward in the room or raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing none, I'll close that public comment period and move on to our work session, State of the City and Goal Setting. And maybe I'm going to pause just a second, waiting on the city manager. But while we wait, council members, my plan is the city manager may have another plan, so I may change course here. But as we discuss things, we'll keep things on the topics in order that that we have on this document before us. And I was curious if Aaron has this as well, city manager. It's just the goal sheet, Aaron.
I have the one from the agenda, and I'm not sure.
I will forward that to the council.
Okay, it's headed to you now in your inbox. It's just a longer form of what is in the packet.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess, well, while we're waiting, thank you, staff members, for joining us. It's not every day that you all are gathered like this, so we sure appreciate it. It will be beneficial.
Mayor, while we have a minute,
Please.
If I could introduce, as I can.
Please, yeah. It's always right when you take a bite, isn't it?
This is Corwin. Corwin
Hey,
is
Corwin.
the city manager intern that's been assigned to the city clerk's office for the next few weeks. So he's a political science major. I can let him fill in some of the blanks. But I thought I'd introduce him to you. He's really interested in finding out more about how local government works. So
Excellent. Well, thank you, City Clerk. Corwin, welcome.
Yes, my name is Corwin. I'm a political science major at the University of Wyoming. I'm taking some time off at university. Just general burnout. I need to do some work, and
Sure.
I wanted to get my first job, which is this internship. And yeah, I'm very interested in local democracy and local politics, and because what happens at the city level affects people's lives more direct level than what happens at state Congress.
Sure.
As a political science major, we mostly focus on national politics, so I wanted to learn something I didn't know as much about.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. You are speaking to some folks that couldn't agree with you more, I think. So welcome. I'm really glad you chose to take your time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for being here tonight.
They have a pretty good MPA program, too.
Yes, we do. We have an excellent political science department here, and we have great professors, and I've had a great experience at University of Wyoming.
Great.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for being here, Corwin. And City Clerk, I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, Mayor.
All right, we're going to hold tight for just a minute, I suppose. And City Manager, when you feel settled, we're to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Council, good evening. You got some snacks, good. Thanks for being here tonight. I think we have a pretty succinct presentation for you, but I think Nancy is going to hand out the hard copy report, which looks intimidating because it is very long, but we are going to shortcut, and what I'd hope to do tonight is kind of hit the high points of the goals report looking back on ’23 and what accomplishments we have made toward those goals. You can go. Oh, they have it. Okay, sorry. And bear with me, because from here up, I have a little germ. Everything else is working just great. So what I wanted to start off with tonight was, first of all, just taking a look at our financial position, looking back to '23 and forward to '24. Thought that this information could help inform your goal-setting conversation after we complete the sort of state of the city report. So we'll go to that first, and I asked our Administrative Services Director, Jennifer Wade, to present that to you tonight. She may have an additional handout with some more detail. This slide will give you the sort of high-level roll-up charts that she'll be referring to.
Director Wade, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. I have the pleasure of leading our session off this evening with an overview of our revenue forecast for 2025, which is frankly in some ways exciting, in other ways a little uncertain, but that's very normal, of course, for the general fund. My presentation tonight will primarily focus on the general fund, and there's good reason for that, but I want to just review that with you again, especially because we'll be in budget season before we know it, and I think, you know, especially with this being an annual process, maybe it's just a good reminder. So when we look at the cluster of governmental funds and we think about what's included there, we talk about the general fund, some really small special revenue funds like economic development, the opioid settlement funds, that more or less take in resources and we spend behind based on various agreements. And so financial planning in those funds is actually quite simple, and we tend to spend behind. Of course, there's the Recreation Center Fund, but it actually generates a lot of its own revenue. It is subsidized by the general fund, and so when we talk about financial health in the general fund, we are also talking about its ability to support the Rec Center Fund. And so when I do financial planning, I tend to aggregate the Rec Center Fund and the general fund together. Our other governmental funds include our capital funds. Now, our capital funds, those funds receive resources from grants or other funds. They're for specific purposes. Even our 2018 SPT tax, that fund is receiving those collections. We can only expend it for ballot initiatives, and so we're just planning for those resources as they come in. So that's why when you're kicking off a goal-setting session like this, you would really laser focus in on that general fund, because the other funds are going to be governed by the health of that fund in a lot of ways, except for that 2018 SPT. In the enterprise funds, we have what I think is an ideal situation at the City of Laramie. We've been engaged in long-term, which means 10-year comprehensive planning. That's for operating cost and capital cost for our water, wastewater, solid waste utilities for over a decade. Not only has staff engaged in that effort, but we've had a governing body that has been supportive of rate increases that have been necessary to support those capital intensive operations. And as you'll remember from a lot of our budget work together, those funds are in good financial health, not by coincidence, but by a lot of hard work over the past decade by staff doing this planning and by councils who have engaged in that process and felt comfortable adopting rate increases to support it. And so those enterprise funds are not a focus of our conversation tonight either. So let's dive into those general fund details. What is on my mind, first and foremost, from a standpoint of optimism, of course, is sales and use taxes. When I forecasted sales and use tax in 2024, I forecasted it just about $100,000 under the recommendation from the final WHAM budget book that comes out. So we develop our own recommendations and then we adjust that if we need to. My number was very, very close to that WHAM recommended amount. But to date in 2024, we have already collected $11.7 million for 5 months of the fiscal year, compared to my $13.9 million forecast forecast. When I dive in to the sector detail, what I can see is we have strong growth in multiple sectors. For example, and I'm not really talking about this chart now, I'm just kind of prepping you for it. I can see that accommodation and food services, which is about 12% of total collections in Albany County, has 7% growth. I can see 6% growth in construction. I can see 6% growth in finance and insurance. I see 9% growth in brick and mortar retail trade. I see 27% growth in online sales and use tax, which I think may be, I want to dive into that further to make sure there's not some one-time stuff going on there, especially because of trends I saw earlier this year. And so I do see strong performance across a lot of our sales and use tax categories. However, in one category, that's utilities, we have a 1,300% increase. That's related to various industrial developments in Albany County. And to date in 2024, my estimate to the city of Laramie for the 4th and 5th cent only is that we have about $4.1 million to date in fiscal 2024 in one-time collections. So if I strip that out and adjust our sales and use tax, I think we're looking next year at between 7 and 10% growth in what I would call ongoing sales and use tax. And that's really going to be the trick for the 2025 budget, is coming up with that sales and use tax forecast that represents that amount we can rely on as ongoing revenue. Because of course, we don't want to fund our personnel. We don't want to start funding our personnel with revenue that we don't think is going to continue coming in for longer than a 2-year period. But we are seeing trends in sales and use tax that we have never seen in Albany County in the 20 years I can see of financial history. I can't speak to before that. And so really the number you see, and City Clerk, if you wouldn't mind going back one slide, the number you see in my forecast preliminarily for next year is $14.8 million for sales and use tax. A year ago, I would have never dreamed that that would be the base forecast. That's a 7% increase. I still think that's a little bit conservative. You want it to be a little bit conservative, because when you start forecasting revenue at more than you are going to get in, you also can end up pretty quickly in a situation of an unsustainable budget. And so I'll be looking throughout the next few months to get additional data to really refine that number, but 14.8 is what I'm starting with, and that's a 7% increase from last year. You'll notice that in the direct distribution, we're forecasting a 41% decrease, but that's because, remember, last year, the legislature appropriated a $6.1 million direct distribution, which we have not seen for many years. Prior to that, our direct distribution had been more around that 3.6 or 3.7 million dollar mark after that last round of funding formula changes. And what we see in the governor's recommendation this year is an additional appropriation for local government funding. However, because of that formula change, Laramie, based on the initial estimates from the LSO, in fact, we're forecasted to get about $100,000 less than we got in 2023 with a $105 million appropriation. And so that direct distribution formula in particular continues to be a matter of concern for management, at least from my perspective, and we will watch that closely throughout the legislative session. The other revenue source that is on my mind as we look into 2025, this is more from a negative way, is property taxes. As you know, there is some proposed legislation. There's a constitutional amendment that would reset property taxes to 2019 values. So in my initial forecast for 2025, I have forecasted about $2 million for property taxes, about actually 1.986, because that's exactly what we got in 2019. If we were to see ballot initiatives be successful that would allow people to get 50% refunded, you would half this by an additional 50%. And so the forecast from the previous year's budget has only gone down by about 5%. However, our actual property taxes in 2023 were about $2.7 million. So we're really looking at about a $700,000 reduction And that ongoing property tax level at 2023 actual values, if the constitutional amendment were to pass and we were to reset to 2019 levels. Inflationary adjustments, normal adjustments will keep charges for services, franchise taxes, those types of things at maybe 5% increases for the year. But I've hit on really the big three: sales and use tax, direct distribution, and property taxes. That concludes what I would go over with you this evening about our initial financial outlook. And I'd be happy to ask maybe the city manager if she has anything to add, or you guys if you have more questions.
I have nothing to add, Council. If you have questions for Jen, now would be the time. Know that we will conclude this conversation, or this report, kind of looping back to revenue outlook for '24, particularly related to specific revenue sources and a potential goal you might consider.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce and then Councilor Shumway.
Yeah, so just to recap, if the property tax bill passes and kicks us back to 2019, that's a $700,000 reduction.
Compared to 2023 levels.
Okay. And the direct distribution based on ALISA numbers is roughly $100,000.
Less than
Even though other communities, could potentially get more because they like their people more, and or like us less. And then the reminder that we didn't talk about was the annual fire hit, right, which is not part of this. The pension, the fire pension, that's $100,000 annually, right, for the next 20 years.
Honorable Mayor, through you, we're already budgeting for that ongoing expense, and if I'm remembering that correctly off the cuff, it's about $150,000 a year.
150? Okay.
And if I would want to confirm that number with you if you were going to talk about it. I'll check it. Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep a running total of our hits from the state, that's all. Thanks.
That will not make you feel optimistic. Councilor Shumway, did you have something?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure I heard this right, but you said there was a 1,300% increase in utilities? Where in the world did that come from?
Honorable Mayor, that's the utilities sector.
Okay.
And we have been told that that is in relation to various industrial siting projects around the county. Of course, the Department of Revenue, they won't really divulge specific information about projects, but they have at least given us that much, is that it's in the utilities sector, it's these big projects, and we would expect that those would be more like one-time type collections.
Yeah, so in this case, Councilor, you
Wind and solar?
You could just probably chalk that up to wind, I think, at this point.
Wind, okay.
largely.
Yeah, I think it's likely wind, and if I could add, I would really love it if the Department of Revenue would be a little bit more forthcoming with the data underlying those sales and use tax collections. It would really help us forecast, because if we did have an additional $200,000 or $300,000 in ongoing revenue that I simply can't see, it would be really nice to know that as we're trying to develop a sustainable budget.
Councilor Newman, did you have something?
Yeah.
Okay, please, and then
I
Councilor
was trying to
Richardson.
take notes, and you mentioned something about a 27% increase on online taxes, and you said something to the effect of that could have been a one-time thing.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor and Councilmember Newman, earlier in the year, this sector was actually experiencing decline. And so this is a sector that I would want to let ride out for the rest of the year before I were to bank on what is actually happening here. It's very normal for us to see increases in this sector. But the amount of that increase, it's been somewhere between maybe 5% and 10% a year, depending on the year and how much people spend, of course. So I'm not thinking that final is 27. I think we've got a spike right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Richardson, then Councilor Gabriel.
I'm sorry, I missed, did you say you did budget in the pension or you haven't budget in the pension? I didn't.
It's budgeted. Honorable Mayor, it is budgeted.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. That's what I thought you said, but then I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly.
Yeah, when something becomes a debt obligation, we consider that just an item that we would always load into that base budget centrally.
Counselor Gabriel?
Thanks,
Please, have at it.
Jim, could you remind us, you just briefly mentioned the opioid settlement, what that entails? Is that restricted money? How much? How many years? Because I remember when it first happened, but I haven't heard much about it lately.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, the city manager is going to speak about the opioid settlement. I'll give you some general information, but then I know the city manager is going to cover this a little later. The city manager and I were speaking earlier today. I don't remember the amount offhand. It is several $1 million. I'm thinking it's somewhere around 3, but I might be missing the mark on that a little because I haven't looked at it in a while. That is money that we are receiving through those various settlements, and it is restricted for use on certain approved initiatives. And maybe that's what I'm comfortable saying at this point because I know that our city manager will go into it more with you later. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, council members? Jen, you mentioned the Economic Development Fund. I was just curious what the bounds are, like what sort of the rules for using that fund are. I think in my time on council, it's only been used once, and that was maybe for loans and grants during the pandemic.
Honorable Mayor, it actually depends. That fund, it's generally restricted for economic development, and there's a section of proceeds in that fund that are just indeed generally restricted for economic development. But then there are subsections of that fund balance that carry more restrictions. And in your budget book, and maybe we should go over this a little bit more, this is a good question. I always publish like the types of general restrictions, but we never really go over them in session. And so you'll see maybe some things that we have to do for X agreement, for Y agreement, for Z agreement. And so if that helps at all. In general, it's for economic development, but then there are some agreements we've put into place over time that make us need to be a little bit more specific, including investment like in the Turner Tract, for example.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right. Any other questions, council members? Okay. Thank you, Director Wade. Yeah, I think it's a couple of 100,000 maybe.
There's not much. Okay.
City manager, please.
So, council, what I would like to do is first start with this document, and I wanted to highlight a few areas that I won't deep dive in the PowerPoint, but I wanted to address with you. So I'm just going to start on page 1.
And City Manager, sorry to interrupt, but just so Councilor O'Doherty knows, this is the document that was emailed to you.
Yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, for clarifying. So on page 1, goal number 1, milestone A, I wanted to just spend a few moments not going over this in great detail, but pointing out that this goal was established by council that we would prioritize planning and construction and reconstruction of public amenities, facilities, and rights-of-way to maximize safe access for persons of all abilities and ages. In compiling this report for the end of the year, I wanted to spend a few minutes here because I think staff just really embraced this and did a great job this year, notably in the Public Works Department and our Assistant City Manager over the Parks Division. So I provided you a great level of detail here with respect to 2 categories of access or accessibility. The first category being public amenities and facilities like parks and park restrooms, et cetera, and trails, for instance. Spring Creek Phase 1 trail, Todd and his crew have been overseeing the construction of that this year, and all of those amenities are being constructed to ADA standards for full accessibility. Then the second category would be with respect to public rights-of-way, so our city streets, alleys, curbs, gutter, sidewalk, et cetera. And in this regard, I think Public Works also has really embraced this and did a great job installing some new rapid flashing beacons and also improving crosswalk accessibility at a number of intersections in the community in tandem with other public improvements that were scheduled. I wanted to highlight one issue here that I thought was exciting and is an outcome of a suggestion from council members. So you'll recall, I have to give you a little history first. So you'll recall the city has for years, decades, done a periodic assessment of the quality and integrity of our pavements throughout the city, our streets. Our pavement condition index ratings is what we call that. So we did that this year, but the Public Works Department, in recognition of this goal and also recognizing that we've had a long-standing concern in the community with curb, gutter, sidewalk adjacent to those paved surfaces, decided to not only assess asphalt or street conditions, but also ask for the concrete adjacent amenities to be assessed assessed. That initial assessment has occurred of concrete curb and gutter, and we're going in with a phase 2 assessment that will really look at using LiDAR technology, the integrity of the sidewalks, and then that gives us this really good look into accessibility issues throughout the community and probably a prioritized list of where we have the worst conditions. I give you that background because we talked about this time last year about the potential to pursue Transportation Alternatives Program grant funding to do maybe some kind of citywide, more comprehensive accessibility improvement in those concrete curb gutter sidewalk areas. So Public Works did approach the Wyoming Department of Transportation. They said, yeah, we think that you could use TAP money for that. However, when they learned about this second phase of LiDAR investigation that we're doing, they said, don't give us that application yet. You sit on it and hold it until you can add that second phase assessment to it. And so, in speaking with Brooks, we are holding that, going to complete that assessment, I think probably by summer, and then we'll be able to submit that application to WIDOT. So that could be an exciting new potential source of funding for accessibility improvements around the community. But bear in mind, what we have traditionally used TAP for is for, things like Spring Creek Phase 1, 2 trails, right? So we're going to probably have to make some value judgments in the future as a community about where to prioritize those funds, but it is exciting to know that we may be able to use TAP for accessibility in the future. And we'll be back in front of you in the summer. Public Works will be with that data, so you'll get to see that. One cool feature I really liked about it, what they have spec'd out, is the data we get back, we'll be able to put basically public-facing story maps out for the public, so they also will be able to see that data. So anyway, a little bit of a deeper dive there. Moving to page 2, this is milestone D. I just mentioned Spring Creek Trail Phase 1. I wanted to kind of give a shout out to the Assistant City Manager and Parks. They're also looking at a grant application for Spring Creek Phase 2 as well, and that is going to be potentially a very big improvement for the community with accessibility, possibly all the way from 3rd to Walmart, uninterrupted and separate from the motorized on-street transportation. I didn't overstate, right? Okay, so I wanted to point that out. Moving to the next page, milestone A on the top of page number 3. I also think this is a really notable achievement, something that the staff have really embraced from your goal set, and that was the integration of greater mental health response capability for the city. And there's a very detailed discussion here, and of course you've received reports throughout the year on this. But Chief Brown, as our new chief, really embraced this, working with the Albany County Mental Health Board agencies, and we are ready to move forward on that program. I think you're going to see an MOU on your next agenda that will memorialize the agreement between the parties and have the new mental health response paradigm moving forward. Under milestone B, that next item there, I did include on behalf of your city attorney a brief report that he provided on the drug and alcohol diversion program out of his office. If you have further questions, I'm sure Bob would be able to answer those for you a lot better than I certainly can. Now I'm going to skip forward to page 5. And I wanted to take a minute on milestone D to let you know that Councilors Cumby and Councilor O'Doherty have worked with us to identify an app that will help us with better managing volunteerism in the community. I think what we have decided is that we will likely use the same app that the University of Wyoming uses to manage its volunteerism, so there's a cool synergy there. I think we're probably about 8 weeks out from getting to a functional space, assuming that we execute a contract for that app this month. So we're making progress on that, and I think it'll be a good new amenity for residents and for staff as a tool to use. And then milestone B at the bottom of that page, the Urban Renewal Authority being propped up is also a really big accomplishment. Council established that board, and Todd Fieser's been leading it and doing a great job, and they are doing a lot of good work. So if you have questions about what's happening there, Todd can certainly answer that. Next page, top of 6, milestone D, which was to look at housing. I wanted to also recognize Derek Taney, our Community and Economic Development Director. When you read this report, and we're going to do a deeper dive in the PowerPoint, but I think what I'd like to preface that with is just by saying, as I compiled this report, and we've done a lot of work on housing this year in 2023 related to the state, because the state really captured their own sense of urgency in late 22 about housing as a crisis, maybe that's impeding economic development, not just in Laramie, but across the state. And so as we've worked with them, it's really stood out to me how dramatic maybe the leadership out of our economic development and planning, community and economic development department and planning office has been over the last 5 to 6 years, really putting Laramie ahead of the curve on that. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later, but I wanted to recognize Derek's efforts, having been over in that space for about 20 plus years now. And then lastly, on page 7, goal number 5 is environmental stewardship, and there are 3 major milestones under that. Also, I wanted to point out how I think our staff have really embraced council's efforts with respect to energy efficiency and environmental stewardship broadly. A lot of detail there. Our new Natural Resource Program Administrator, Jay Smith, is really getting up on his feet and doing a great job here, but I think across all departments, particularly Public Works and the more infrastructure intensive areas of our operation, we're seeing a lot of energy and a lot of creativity in achieving these goals, and many of these will continue into 24 as well. So that's that. All I wanted to quickly go over from the handout, and if you have questions on any of those, you could do that now, or we could do a deeper dive into a couple of these topics and then do questions, Mayor.
If the council's okay with that, I'd rather we just keep moving
Okay,
and hold our
very good.
questions.
Okay, so just continuing on our theme of last year a little bit, one of the goals that you had said established for us and for the community was how can we better engage residents and the public about things that the city council is doing, things that city staff are up to, and what the city overall is doing, what kind of work we're doing. Sorry, I need to get logged in here just a minute. My screen timed out. So I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about our public engagement and public relations efforts. And here's a look at some of the outcomes from the last, it's actually a 13-month retrospective versus 12, but that's pretty close. And I think what you'll see, we went into this with the goals to just increase brand awareness, right? That's the terminology or the lingo that our public relations folks use. But what that means for us is increase awareness overall about what the city is doing, what the city council is doing in terms of policy decisions and staff. Also increasing traffic to our website and really defining the city website as a definitive source for all things that people need to know about the city, and then helping people not only drive people there, but helping them to be able to better navigate the website and make it more intuitive for people. And then increasing social engagement just generally. So here's our outlook. We started our services now 13 months ago working with LUM. We also have some in-house staff that are working on this with LUM, but also working on separate objectives. We've seen a 638-fold increase in our Facebook page likes or engagements, as they say in their industry. And we have 167 new followers on Instagram, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I think we had like 2 before we started, so that's pretty significant. On Instagram, which is, as many of you know, a platform that a lot of our younger population use, and for me that was a key goal, is how do we connect with our college-age population and our young working professionals. So we've seen Instagram engagement up by 692%, and I think that's really great. So that's not just followers, but that's views and the whole gamut of engagement through that platform. Facebook also is up by 124%. A lot of our younger demographic use that, a lot of our middle-aged people use it, and a lot of our older population use it, so that's a good broad-reaching tool. kind of skipping forward, when we look to 24, the opportunities that we see is just to continue driving up that engagement, the points that I just talked about. And lastly, I wanted to mention that in 23, our average monthly media coverage was up by about 2%, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in 24 to continue to grow that up beyond with additional new content, like video content, which is part of what we are working on in my office with the management analyst being responsible there. So a little bit of a deep dive there. Any questions on resident and public engagement? And I have some very detailed metrics I can send you. We were trying to roll them up and make them less intimidating looking.
Council, any questions before we move on? Okay. City Manager, I don't know how much we have by way of flexibility on this, but I think maybe like under the sort of like 3 opportunities, and it says and it's about increasing engagement. You know, I wonder if the higher level goal, we would increase engagement by providing more value to folks with our posts. And I just wonder if that's maybe a better,
Yeah.
I mean, people will follow you or engage with your post if you're offering them something they needed. So.
Yeah, you know, Mayor, I think that's such a great point, and I think what I would say is, I think that's what we mean. I think that's what LUM understands our goal is that we have tasked them with, and it's certainly my understanding as well, for us to be giving people valuable information, right?
Sure, yeah.
Things that they like because they're like, wow, this helped me know like when to put my garbage out or whatever is needed. So I appreciate that clarification.
Sure, yeah, I think in the world now where so much is driven by sort of algorithms and clickbaity headlines, you know, like they could just post which council member would win in a fight and a bunch of people would click on it, right? So we would rather have value add.
Right, good point.
Cool, all right, back to you.
Okay. Then I wanted to spend a little time, as I promised you, on housing. You had asked for some specific information, and we have crunched those numbers for you. But I wanted to just point out that our housing study done in originally 2015 really, I've come to realize was really kind of ahead of its time, if you will. It was cutting edge. It was among one of the first in the state. 2015 sounds old though, right? I want to also tell you that we've done a lot of looking at whether that data is still relevant. It's 2024, you know, it's 9 years old now. And we've done it, as many of you will recall, after 2015, we did a number of our own sort of deep dive intensive studies, like looking at our development code for ways that we could minimize housing burden on developers. And we did a number of other spot studies like in Thrive. And all of those follow-up studies that we did in 16, 17, 18, 19, and concluding in 20 with Thrive shored up the original findings of the 2015 study. And then, as I said, the state kind of in late 22, they also kind of raised the alarm about housing. They've been doing their own studies since then, and the state level data is continuing to reinforce our 2015 projections. So I want to put that out there because it was certainly on my mind earlier this year, like, hey, is this still relevant? Do we need to update it? And I think I would tell you that I think it is still relevant based on what we're seeing. You had asked for some information, and one of those bits of information was how many housing lots do we have ready in this town right now? Like if you want to go build a house tomorrow, how many lots would you have to choose from? And so Derek and his crew did a bunch of number crunching for us. What we know right now is we have 110 residential lots ready to be built on in Laramie today. Within the next 6 months, you have approved final plats that would add 49 additional small home lots and 4 large multifamily lots as soon as the infrastructure is done connecting those areas. And then they'll be ready to be built. But they're approved from a regulatory standpoint. We just have to finish the infrastructure. And then you have preliminary plats that you have approved that are awaiting final platting. And when those come to fruition, that would bring another 592 build-ready home lots to into the Laramie market. And when I say that, I shouldn't say market, I should say into the city of Laramie, because obviously our housing market encompasses areas well outside of the city of Laramie. But right now within the city, 110 residential lots ready to build on. So then we went back and we looked at, well, how many building permits are we being asked to issue and issuing every year? So going back to 2015, when the housing study was completed, we've been averaging about 60, I think it was like 60.89 building permits per year that the city has issued. I think it's 494 total or something like that. And that's for single-family homes. One thing you should know is, you know, people will say anecdotally, well, I didn't get my building permit, but you need to know that this city almost never denies a building permit. I mean, it's absolutely like 1 in 100, if that. So what will happen is people may encounter bumps along the way of getting to their building permit. You know, they may give the plans and they may be reviewed by code admin, and code admin says, gosh, you're missing this. We need more data about, you know, fire suppression or whatever it might be. But we always get to the point of issuing those permits, and denial is almost non-existent. So we've issued 60 plus per year since 2015 roughly, and 9 multifamily units have also been permitted for construction that would add 108 units between those 9 family or multifamily buildings. Okay, so then when we look at that, how does demand for housing that was projected in our housing study compare to the supply that we've added? And you'll see by our best numbers, we think there are 602 units of housing that have actually been constructed through 2023, so between 2015 and 23. What your housing study projected was we would need 1,538 new units by 2020. So we're not building, certainly, at the rate that we would need to be building to meet the projected demand from the housing study. And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. What I do want to point out from this, though, is, like I said, building permits are, almost never denied. Your preliminary plats and plats in general also are, as you all know, you approve them all the time. They are never almost never denied or not approved, and may have a few blips in the road, but we get there. So I guess what I would say is I think the changes that you all have made based on the code audit and the housing study to amend our development code have certainly created a regulatory space where we are permitting lots left and right all the time, and we're permitting the building on those lots as well. And there's got to be other solutions that we can bring to bear, and I don't know what those are, but we're hoping that in the work with the state and the ideas that the state is bouncing around, that we may see some new solutions come to bear that are beyond our means, like the state may be contributing to arterial infrastructure to support housing development, right, which is something that as a city we can't pay for. But if the state would help us, we have a whole bunch of infrastructure and preliminary plats in the queue that could benefit from that kind of state and local partnership. Did that make sense?
It did.
Okay, good. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Keep going. We'll grab questions at the end.
Last item is I just wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on the goal with respect to enterprise resource planning. This is our enormous, 4 or 5 year software project to really replace everything about how our business operates. I worked with Jen, and she helped to crunch some numbers to try to demonstrate the impact of phase 1. And I know you guys had a work session about this just a few months ago, so I don't want to talk about the detail of the software, but I want to talk about the burden on staff and the participation of staff in this process. So you get to see folks, like everybody in this room, who are the faces of the departments and the people that are doing the work of conducting this integration, and then they are also the face of the people who have to learn how to operate the new software, which is pretty much every person here in the city. So if you look at just finance phase 1, the first phase that we're going to go live with in February, and what we've been most engaged with up until this point, and I think Jen made a pretty conservative estimate for us here, but in 2023 alone, we project that the project team, so this is IT, purchasing, and finance largely, largely, and I should mention our Public Works Director's been involved as well. The project team alone has put in about almost 3,000 hours of work just on the implementation side. And then the end user training, all the people who then have to be trained to do the work of using the new software and know how to use it and use it fully and get the value that we should out of it. We estimate about 1,785 hours of staff training. So it's really huge. And for me, I wanted to look at this from a workflow standpoint because all of the people who are doing this work are still doing the regular job that they're tasked with and hired to do. So I was really proud of everybody when I look at these numbers. That's enormous. So I wanted to share that with you. What we will be moving to next in phase 2 is EnerGov, and the Assistant City Manager, Public Works Director are spearheading that. That's having a huge effect on staff like in Community and Economic Development Department who deal with code administration and planning. We're set to go live with that in June of '24. Then Human Capital and Risk Management is scheduled to start maybe in October, and then we've got future phases in out years. So this is an ongoing 3 to 4 year objective, as you know, but there's a look at just what phase 1 was demanding of folks. Any questions on that before I move to now? No. Okay, so I have on the last page of your handout, page 8, I have included a couple of suggestions for priorities that you may want to consider in 2024. Some of these are really continuations of items that were in 2023, and so I'm just going to walk through these very quickly. The first one would be to determine, I don't want to move that, to determine how the city and county will treat the opioid settlement monies, to Councilor Gabriel's question earlier. As Jen said, we have several $1 million that's coming to the city. There's also money coming to the county. I told you all earlier this year that what I'd like to do is put together a group of subject matter experts from people working in this space in both of the city and county organizations and let them kind of work through this for a number of months and then bring forward recommendations for what the best ways to spend those monies might be to have the single greatest impacts in the community within the allowances that we have for how we can spend those monies. And they're fairly broad, but they do all deal with opioid drug use and prevention and treatment, and touching in some ways, Councilor, as you said, on mental health. So we had one meeting this year so far. There's been a statewide conference call that everybody's been kind of listening in on for the last number of months, but I think with 2024 here, we really need to get that working group established and let them give them reins to go out and figure out how to maximize the impact of these monies, which are one time. That's the other thing to remember. If we prop up programs, we'll have to figure out, okay, we propped it up, and when the money's run out, we'll have to know how we're going to continue that. Item B. We are at the end of the Fitch study, is what we call it. Fitch is our consultant. They work nationally on issues related to E911 ambulance and medical patient transfers in ambulance services. You'll recall with Ivinson Memorial Hospital, we jointly contracted with them this year to review what we do, how we do our business, and kind of help us craft a business plan for how to most effectively do these businesses into the future. So what we need to do as we're coming to the end of that is we're starting conversations with our counterparts at the hospital. We need to decide how we're going to operate E911 and ambulance the same as we have or differently, and how we're going to operate medical interfacility patient transfers the same as we have or differently, come to terms on that and hopefully enter into a renewed agreement and then implement whatever that means, what those changes, if there are changes, might mean within the fire department in 2024. Item C is something Jen and I have been talking about. We're going to have some cool new capabilities with our finance new ERP software through Tyler. And so we'd like to work with you in 2024 to develop benchmarks, really. What's the council's idea of how we would measure increased transparency in our budgeting process. And so we can start thinking about how our new software can facilitate that. I should let you know that we've already kind of started some new efforts this year. We've got a budget survey out on the street, as they say. Some of you may have seen that. We're asking the public for input this year based on some conversation that I had with all of you last year, and we will be weaving that more into the budget process. So just kind of continuing from that baby step into what the future looks like with our enhanced capability. Item D, we need to complete the development of our public transportation plan that we got grant funding for this year. You know about that. You have a goal related to the resiliency of the stormwater management system in '23. We've been working with a consultant on that, and we know in 2024 we will be bringing forward a business plan, really, for the stormwater collection system and how that we can make that a sustainable, fiscally sustainable, and a system that's operating to the level that we require it to. So we'll be bringing that data to you this year, and I think we'll be able to conclude that business planning process that's been going on now for about 12 months, 18 months. Item F is with the new mental health response paradigm that the chief has worked with our community partners to put in place. I think it's important that we make sure that we figure out what we're going to measure so that in 12 months or 24 months or 36 months we can look back and measure the effectiveness and efficacy of this program generally. So something that the chief and I have talked about and is woven into the MOU, those benchmarks and those data points that are going to be gathered, you'll see that addressed to some degree in the MOU coming to you. And then the last item is the municipal emissions reduction plan has been operating all year and just going gangbusters, but it hasn't come to council yet, but it is getting ready to, and I think it's going to be really interesting and energizing for council. As you recall, we worked with the Hobbs School to jointly fund a graduate assistantship focused on doing, basically putting this plan together for us. Corinne's been doing a fantastic job. She and Jay and I and the Environmental Advisory Committee have been looking at this, and it's almost done, and it's ready to come to you, and she will be in her last semester this spring of her 2-year graduate assistantship, and eager to wrap this project up with you. Once you all adopt that, assuming you do, then we'll have lots of action strategies and plans that we have to implement coming out of that over a series of years, I'm sure. That's all I have for you.
Well, thank you, City Manager. Council members, do you have any questions about any of that before we hop into the next phase of this conversation? Councilor O'Doherty? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, City Manager. I was really happy to see these priorities because they were better worded versions of things that I had in mind. I was wondering if your ordering is relevant or if it's just these were things that came to mind. I mean, is A more, you've put that higher, is that a priority order too? Thanks.
Through you, Mayor, Councilor Doherty, no, there is no order here. These are just items that are either, like I said, continuation of work done in 2023 that we can conclude in 24, and there is no order. They are all, I think, very important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor. Any other questions, council members? And City Manager, had you conceived at all how you would like to go about having, sort of framing a conversation around modification or addition of goals? Okay. Well, I have thought a little bit about that. I was hoping the city manager had maybe a better idea, but what I think we'll do is, bearing all of this in mind, and I would note maybe specifically the workload of ERP. So as you think about how ambitious you want your council goals to be, keep in mind our staff is spread quite thin. And we have a whole multi-page document they're working on already. But I would also note that this is, if you want something in the goals that would require money, this is the time to do it as well. So before we head into the budget. So what we're going to do, council, is just start on this the resolution we have adopting the goals originally, and maybe just work our way through by sections. And I believe that it's publicly available. It's on the, if anyone's watching, it's the document that's in the packet. And Counselor, was that what you were going to point out? Counselor O'Doherty, did you have something to add?
Do you mean the goals that we adopted last year?
Yeah, that's correct, Counselor. Yeah, I think that my
like
general
that.
idea, unless the council objects to this idea, is to revise the existing ones because we are the same council that adopted the existing goals. Sound okay? Counselor Newman?
And I just wanted to say, like, out of all of these, we've only completed 7 milestones, so it would be, let's not start over.
Good. I like the way you're thinking. All right, council members, did anyone have anything they'd like to add, change, or sort of discuss further in this infrastructure planning and investment goal, which is goal number 1? I had one note. As we have this conversation about the accessibility for folks who use wheelchairs, City Manager, you had mentioned, I don't remember the technology, so just forgive me there, but mapping sort of like which intersections are in the worst shape, but I think maybe a counterweight to that conversation should also be sort of what, because we know we will have limited funding for this, because we always have limited funding and they're not all going to be right, prioritizing ways for folks to get around. So completing entire routes rather than sort of like, hey, this intersection now looks really great, but there's nowhere to go from that intersection. So I think maybe some conversation, whether it's here with the Disabilities Commission, some way to kind of identify some of those routes. I know Councilor O'Doherty often mentions the near Laramie senior apartments because there's sort of densities of populations who use wheelchairs or other mobility devices. I think prioritizing some of those would be valuable. And I imagine that's in your mind as well, but just so that it's said. Anything else the council members want to add? Councilor Pierce, and then Councilor O'Doherty, I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, I'm just very supportive of the stormwater drainage issue, and whatever we can do to keep that moving forward, that's great. And you guys are doing great work, so thank you so far.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce. Councilor O'Doherty.
And I would add that the stormwater drainage is also related to the the transportation on our sidewalks and all. So I'm in favor of keeping that a strong priority. But I also was wondering if, the Advisory Commission on Disabilities was looking at what Cheyenne did with Councilor Shumway's son, AARP. They did a walk survey, and I wonder if we could field check some of the LIDAR results with getting volunteers to walk sidewalks. I think it's a good opportunity for people to become aware of where we have problems and make people more aware of just what it's like getting around in Laramie. So I would like to keep that a priority and also just look for more clever ways to engage the public to help us with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Doherty. Councilor Newman, and then Councilor Richardson.
I'll shoot an email.
Okay. Councilor Richardson.
I just wanted to piggyback on that a little bit. Actually, Councilor O'Doherty last night, Laramie Main Street had a conversation about that same kind of walkabout neighborhoods to determine if that's something that so perhaps jointly with Main Street and council, we could look at what that looks like for downtown specifically and seek some funding opportunities through AARP, either through Main Street or city.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything else, council members, on this section? Great. The next section is going to be interagency collaboration. So this is mental health board, diversion programs, which we did receive that update on.
Mr. Mayor?
Please, Councilor.
Could we ask the city clerk to put those, to zoom in on each section, put that on the screen so that we can, so I don't have to keep going back and forth and we're all looking at the same document. I think if we just look at the one that's in our packet, because the summary is there.
Sure. Yeah, sure, Councilor Doherty. I can always rely on you for good ideas.
She's got it.
She's got it. And the city clerk for pulling them off. Okay, no problem. The question I had on this one, city manager, what is the, I think it said 75% complete on the boards and commission review. What's the process look like from there? Do they come back with recommendations from staff on what to do with these boards? Is that what the council should expect? And all at once or in separate pieces?
Mayor, that's a great question. Excuse me, and probably something that we should talk about. You have a work session scheduled next month where I wanted to present the concept that we have for the Human Rights Commission. As you know, that will touch on the way I currently envision it. It would touch on the Disabilities Commission and maybe the Traffic Commission, and maybe move some of their responsibilities under this commission and free them up for some other activities. But as far as a comprehensive look, I can certainly, we had that work session in November. I can certainly share other ideas I might have beyond that with you, maybe separately. If you would like to know those, I could send you a report or something. But I do think that the council has some valuable input. I've heard little things over the last year from each of you. So I don't know, maybe we need to do both those things and talk, maybe cover that report comprehensively in a work session in the first quarter or something.
Okay. Yeah,
Does
I think that's a good idea. I hate to assign us another work session, but that's okay. And yeah, I think certainly standing up a new board or any conversation about standing up or shrinking a board in any way probably deserves its own conversation, but an overview would be helpful, a deeper overview, because we had that brief conversation and
that would also,
we had more thoughts.
That would afford me the time as well to talk with the management team. I think they also have some ideas about the boards that they staff specifically.
That's great. Yeah, and I think if we can get some idea, I think there are some non-city boards that I just don't even know if they want us there, and if we're just a holdover, and we've always been there, so here we are still. Be interested to know from the board's point of view or the staff member who maybe goes to a board. So I suppose that's less likely in a non-city board. Okay. Talk to myself in a circle. Vice Mayor.
I'm wondering if related to interagency collaboration, if we might want to add some that are beginning to actively develop. One we've already been working on, and that's the Albany County Mental Health Advisory Board. And we now have a seat on that board, and that board has been working with the crisis response model, et cetera. So that is an active interagency endeavor. A second one, Councilor O'Doherty and I have been working for a number of months with a number of agencies related to rental and housing in Laramie. And what we found out is that a number of us were working individually doing repetitive work. We were doing the same work, creating surveys and things like that. And we have been, with the assistance of Virginia Vincenti, coming together with the Healthy Aging Coalition, Vulnerable Adults Working Group, with legislative representatives, especially Representative Chestik and Provenza, about rental and housing as a community effort. These groups make up a very broad and representative individuals who are actively working on housing and rental. So I think that that's been an important part of our work, and that maybe we would acknowledge that in our interagency work and continue to put efforts toward pulling that coalition together. And then the third that I might suggest that we add, and I'm not trying to make more work, I'm just trying to acknowledge the work we're already doing. The president of the university, President Seidel, has requested the Town and Gown Association to go through a restructuring, which is now beginning. This group will be joining the International Town and Gown Association, go through some formal sessions, and then in the next year, we'll be working on expanding and redefining the scope of what the work of that will be, and to try to build and reestablish a coalition of town and gown, of community partners with university and LCCC partnerships. So I think that that's requiring, it's going to take a lot of work, and that it would be appropriate to have that on our, listed on our interagencies. Is Wyotech part of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. In fact, I think they proudly say they were the first to sign the new agreement. Wyotech was. So I don't know, Council. We obviously can't vote on any of this, and there will be an opportunity to vote if you disagree. But I'm of the mind that if there's not a strong opposition, we're just going to add it for now, and we can discuss them in detail later. Okay. Anything else on interagency collaboration?
I just have a comment.
Please.
Yeah, so the milestone B, I do like that we're going to keep that. Hopefully we keep that, because that's something the youth council is really focusing on too. So it would, I think it would look bad if we kind of like veered away from their work, right? And I was told to say that by my daughter. So.
It's good lobbying on her part. All right, I think that sounds great. All right, council members, we're going to move on to, yeah, please, Vice Mayor.
I just had one other question, and just to put it out there, I'm wondering with milestone B, if those efforts in the diversion program might be compatible with the opioid settlement money, if somehow, those can be connected at some point.
Okay. Councilor Doherty?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. And also, can we remove milestone C, or because, I mean, I assume our city manager, she knows which things we should just, okay, check, we did that last time, now we don't have to keep it on there. Isn't C, wasn't that already accomplished, or am I too optimistic?
Through you, Mayor.
And like the implement a police community relations board, we have that, in the next section. So or can we just cross those out that we know that we accomplished?
Through you, Mayor. With Councilor Doherty, with milestone C, yes, you can cross it off. You've adopted the plan, which establishes goals going forward that we're already working on, and so it's sort of self-executing now.
Thank you, and good point, Councilor. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, we'll move on to city services and resident engagement. Go.
I have one question about that piece, though. I am totally on board with crossing that off, but would still love to continue to get updates if there is progress being made on anything around those, which I assume we would get, but I shouldn't say progress, but just kind of how that will continue to roll out as a program and the joint work being done.
Great. Anything else on this section? All right, moving on to the next, city services, resident engagement. Councilor Newman, please.
So the packet that we received says milestone is complete. I would like to see this continue, though, instead of it saying complete. See if we can get more city engagement, as fun as our meetings are.
Are you talking about the specific goal
Yeah,
or the
so-
entire section?
No, like milestone C.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it says completed, but if we can just continue that.
So missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yep.
C's on the back.
It's on the very top. It almost looks like it's not there.
Yeah, so if we, instead of, let's just continue it.
And I think there may be, some interest, certainly from my mind, there's interest in finding other ways. Like this is, I think,
Sure.
the success of Loom is, I think, is great, but there may be other ways. Councilor O'Doherty spent a lot of time at the farmer's market with other council members, of course, but those things are valuable, and we should continue to include those. Anything else on this section? Okay.
Mayor?
Oh, yeah, Councilor O'Doherty.
Counselor Newman's kind of cutting out for me, so I don't know if it's his microphone placement, but I was wondering, milestone A under goal 3 looks a lot like the last milestone in goal 2, so could we just, we already have the police board, could we say, including when we're evaluating boards and commissions, can we just say that consider the Civil Rights Commission or Human Rights Commission? What I'm saying is combine milestone A of goal 4 into whatever the last milestone of goal 2. So a page before.
Yeah, Counselor, I get what you're saying. I think the only issue would be just the titling of the sections, which is, semantics, I suppose, but one of them is about interagency collaboration, the other is about sort of like resident engagement and service.
Okay.
So that might be the distinction, but I think we probably could combine those in some way.
I guess it's not necessary. Thanks.
Vice Mayor?
I think we need to update milestone D in this goal, establish a municipal volunteer program. So we have considered the smartphone app, and as the city manager said, are 8 weeks out from contracting with that. So then our goal would be to implement rather than establish. It would be to implement the volunteer program, which will take work on all of our parts.
Good point. Okay.
And instead of consider, it'd be implement using our app.
I think monitoring it as well.
Sure, yeah. Some variety of sort of like monitoring the metrics of use.
Sure, yeah. But we've moved beyond that into the next phase.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I think that's great. Anyone else on this section before we move on? Okay.
Find something.
I think we can just trust Janine to massage the language.
Sure.
Right.
And the Vice Mayor and I can work with you, Janine, on some of this stuff as well.
Give it a rundown.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to the economic development conversation. And, Assistant City Manager, I know you've been working with the URA. So I guess I'm curious about milestone A. Is that a conversation the URA is having, which is Snowy Range Road? Are they that far along? Sorry to catch you in the middle.
Honorable Mayor, through you, that is not a conversation that we've had with URA.
Okay, thank you.
He said is not.
Is not. Okay. Councilor Richardson.
I also just have a question about that. Is that an area where we could utilize the retail coach to think about development, or are they already broadly looking citywide?
City Manager, please.
Council, I probably should have touched on this one a little bit as well. So I'll answer, so yes, to your question, Councilmember Richardson, Derek and I talked with the retail coach a year ago about this notion, and they were somewhat aware of it because this concept of creating a sort of recreation-focused, tourism-focused corridor out of Snowy Range Road with businesses like that clustered out there was sort of similarly discussed as part of the Thrive Plan. So they're aware of that. I should have covered this, so let me give you the status report here. So this goal kind of popped in late last year in your goal setting, and we talked about the fact that it overlapped a little with a concept from our Economic Development Thrive Plan. It's never been, it's 0% complete because honestly, it was never really clear to me if the council would lead this, if staff would lead this, or where we should go. So other than that conversation with the retail coach, we haven't done much. And there's a lot of infrastructure, surface level infrastructure issues out there. So something interesting has happened in the last 6 to 8 weeks, and that's the update I provided to you here. We originally thought that YDOT was going to do just like a mill and overlay improvement of that corridor. Well, their potholing recently revealed to them they need to reconstruct the entire highway. So they're going to do a full reconstruction. So this came to the attention of Public Works a few weeks back. You might remember, some of you, that in 2016 or 17, I can't remember, we applied for TAP funding through YDOT, and we developed a pedestrian and non-motorized pathway program for Snowy Range Road corridor that YDOT reviewed and endorsed effectively. We had it sitting there because we thought that with their planned improvements coming up in the next roughly decade-ish, that there might be some chance to integrate some of that kind of thing into the roadway. And now that they're going to do a full reconstruction, the chance for that integration is much bigger. So I guess what I said here in this report, and I provided you the link to that report if you want to refresh your memory of it, but we started talking to YDOT about that a little bit. It's a long ways out. It's not till 28? At least 28 or 29. But where I'm going is the infrastructure there on the surface is a problem, and it impedes development of anything really along that corridor as far as private business goes. So I see this as a real opportunity. This project, if we can get it designed the way we want and built the way we like and the plan called for, it could really create almost like this blank canvas out there that's fresh and new and in good shape that could really spur development and maybe get us closer to the vision that we have here for creating this tourism and outdoor recreation focused business cluster along Snowy Range Road, but it's a ways out.
City Manager, what is the, when you say, so I know once you're one block off of Snowy Range, you're on dirt surface, so obviously you'd have to pave that. But what is it about the pavement on Snowy Range that would inhibit development?
Yeah, I should have been more specific, Mayor. So there are sections, there are intersecting streets that intersect Snowy Range that are paved for even, in some cases, more than a block. But the problem is for the developer. They come in, they buy the property, and when they redevelop it triggers, now you got to build the street. Right?
Right.
And so the lack of street there is a problem. And so I left off an important piece of that. If YDOT's going to redo the surface and we can get full integrated motorized, non-motorized use there, maybe then we could do paving. And we're doing this major, I'm pointing at Brooks because he's doing it, we're engaged in that Wyoming Avenue paving project, and that's putting in some additional stormwater infrastructure underground. Mm-hmm. So we might be able to marry additional paving on that half-block section to take that burden off of developers who might want to locate with frontage on Snowy Range Road. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I think
then they don't have to pay for the street.
Yeah, I'm trying to sort out, I mean, I can imagine there are some properties that I can imagine sort of like that property south of the Fire Station 3 would require, if you develop the whole thing, right, would require the, whatever that back street is behind it by the laundromat. But I'm trying to think of other, I mean, it seems like there are plenty of spaces out there that wouldn't require much by way of improvement beyond sort of like what's required anywhere, right? And the reason I'm asking, a few questions on this is it seems like us having a plan for what's going to happen out there would be beneficial before YDOT paves, so that we're not, cutting into something for an infrastructure need that maybe a specific business would have, that it's a blank slate, it's sort of like, it's a canvas ready to go, but you still may have to dig it up to put something, some infrastructure in, or make curb cuts, something of that sort, which, aren't like substantially effective on the street, but would have, some impact. And so I'm just wondering, sort of like, given that we have 4 years, it seems like maybe we should have some conversation about what we might do, and I don't have an answer for what that would be. And I don't imagine staff does either, but
I think where your mind is, though, Mayor, is appropriate. And I know I wasn't here last week, but I understood Brooks was bringing forward the switcheroo in the budget to change the priority for funding, not Grand Avenue, I said it the other way. We were planning to do underground work in Snowy Range for the mill and overlay, and to change that priority. Oh, it was in the budget amendment, sorry, that's where it was. So these guys are already thinking about, okay, well, this means we need to get underground work done under Snowy Range before they get in there, and for some years, we can look at the adjacent connecting streets as well that are gonna be triggered for development if people develop, say, I don't know, what would be cool, Cabela's on Snowy Range Road. They don't just have to develop Snowy Range Road, they have to develop their side streets and around as well. So we can be looking at that.
Okay.
And I think that's what you're saying. So that we're doing the underground, and then maybe if YDOT does the paving, we can add to the scope and do the paving on the side streets that are city streets, not state highway.
Yeah.
And do a real.
Yeah, and I think when you think about big, ambitious, like grocery store, box store type development, that makes more sense. I'm wondering about like smaller development that would be, the only street frontage would be paved streets, because it's only going to go back half a block, right? And then the other frontage is Snowy Range.
Yeah.
There are plenty of those spaces that need developed on Snowy Range, so I'm wondering if there's any way, my curiosity with this is if there's any way for us to incentivize that development, or sort of like encourage it to happen. And the URA was one thought in my mind. I don't really know the mechanism of the URA in detail enough to know how that might function, but it just seemed like there could be there's quite a low tax base as it sits, so maybe there would be some improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think Brooks, Derek, and Todd and I will put our head together on this. But it just came up, and it's such a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
We really need to think about it.
Cool. Councilor Newman, and then.
Mine's a different topic.
Okay, Councilor Pierce then.
Yeah, thanks. I would actually be supportive of some sort of visioning type document or group to kind of look at that whole stretch really broadly. I mean, I'm thinking, just based on some previous conversations with folks, a potential second rec center for the next SPT, and I don't mean rec with another pool, but I mean like indoor soccer or something. I mean, I can just see where if we had a substantial city investment on that side of town and on that road, I think that would be great as well. And I mean, just some visioning. I mean, we already have the snowmobile, and we've got stuff there that's really kind of recreation-ish, right? We can just get a little bit more going. I think that'd be great.
Great. Anyone else on this topic before we? Okay, Councilor Newman.
Okay, I'll just hit on this topic real fast, because some of those would be just, real easy to develop. Obviously, I live over there and run all over there, so, that'd be nice to have some sort of rec something, or on that side of town, instead of, I live over there and now I gotta drive all the way to Walmart, basically, to go to a rec center, so maybe something like that. So anyways, my question was on milestone F. So the seventh penny. I know council's been talking about this even before I was on council, and I don't know how long before. Is this something that we could move up so we can discuss it? Because it seems like, and here's my reasoning. It seems like it's always at the bottom and then we never talk about it. And then the next year it's always at the bottom and then we never talk about it. Is it really something that if we're not talking about, do we really need to even have it as a goal, or do we move it up? It's kind of my thought.
Okay. Anyone have any thoughts there? Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I think probably one of the reasons it's kind of low because it hasn't been successful in the past, and it's been a real struggle to get people on board. The sixth penny has been very easy, but seventh penny, I remember when I was a commissioner, we tried it, and it was like, whoa. I mean, maybe 25% approved it. I mean, it wasn't even close.
And nowhere in the state has adopted a seventh penny,
Right.
so it'd be.
So it's just, yeah, it's one of those things that people look at it with a lot of trepidation, questions, and, you know, I think it would be great to have, you know, we talked about it on our Pilot Hill group of funding that particular project, but trying selling it to the public is very difficult.
So is it something that we should just cross off? And because to me, like if it's on here, I want to try to achieve as most of this, right, as probably most of you guys do. But if it's something that has been shot down before, maybe we take it off our goals for a couple of years or a year or something and focus on something else.
You know, I would think to have it there, you know, as a possibility, but expectation-wise, I'm not sure how far it's going to go.
Yeah, and I think the goal specifically, you know, notes, it doesn't say adopt a seventh penny, right? It says to evaluate the needs and potential uses, and I think that continues to be useful.
But did we do that at all last year?
I've had some conversations about it. I think, you know, I think staff members have probably had conversations and other council members. Like Councilor Gabriel mentioned, we discussed it in the Pilot Hill board meeting. I know a lot of folks that are interested in it, organizations, folks being.
And that was all before me, which is why I asked.
Yeah, understood. So, yeah, I mean, I continue to think it has a value in being on our goals, even if we don't nail it, you know. Councilor Richardson?
Thank you. I also think that if we do come to some sort of a decision on it, I would like to see a lot of the funds that we are utilizing for, you know, doing these communication pieces for city work, really focusing on a communication strategy around this so that you are really educating the public, getting it out there in a way that is like marketing the seventh penny, not just hoping that people will know enough about it to pass it, sort of thing.
Councilor Newman?
Is this something that we could brainstorm at some sort of work session, like later on too?
We would need the county commissioners involved, I suppose, as well, in any conversations about that, but imagine we probably could. And we're going to have a conversation at some point, not this year, but quite soon, about renewals of other pennies as well. So who's next? I've lost track. Councilor Shumway, Vice Mayor, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Gabriel and I discovered early on that the rec center never got traction, never got off the ground until there was a group called Friends of Community Recreation, and they drove the project, and we then were able to use their ideas and their momentum to make things happen. I don't know that the seventh penny will ever be our source for this. It just doesn't seem to fly in the state of Wyoming yet. As soon as somebody utilizes seventh or a portion of the 7th cent, maybe that's something we can take a look at. But I don't know how soon the specific purpose tax is coming up again, but it's not too far around the corner, and we can be looking at projects like this.
Vice Mayor, and then to Councilor Pierce.
I'm wondering, with this goal of economic development, if we need to add a goal that addresses rental, that somehow we kind of, we've passed the rental ordinance that looks at that. It's my understanding currently that adherence of people registering is at about a third. Am I correct in that? Yeah. And it seems that we need some sort of effort to bring that forward and to also address some of the predatory practices that are occurring right now that we're getting reports on, and anecdotal stories and some data. So I'm wondering if in economic development, we need to add something where we continue to focus on rental housing, the condition of housing, predatory practice, and the enforcement of the rental ordinance.
I have the same written, and just said evaluation of the current rental program and seek additional options for, I mean, broadly progress, but I like the specifications that you noted, Sharon.
Okay. We'll find a section for where that fits appropriately, but
We hear a lot of people leave, they don't stay because they can't find appropriate housing, they can't buy a house here. So I think it's very related to economic development and the development of our community.
Or city engagement, resident engagement, too.
so a continued effort on rentals. I know that, there are constraints on us, obviously, about, we're not allowed as a municipality to enter the contract conversation, things like that. But a follow-up would be helpful, I think. Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, so back to that 7-cent conversation. It just takes the idea, right? Like the rec center did 20-plus years ago. It just takes the idea to get the community, and maybe not government, kind of getting excited about something like that. And I actually think some sort of indoor soccer, field hockey, something, new ice arena, I mean, there's got to be some idea out there that would get this community really excited, that could work on that road and in that area and for that 7 cent.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. The council asking, the government asking for money is
Never a good
risky.
plan.
Yeah, it's better to have the dog wag the tail, I think. All right, so I had Councilor Richardson. I'm not sure if yours was the rental conversation or not, but you were next on my list.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good?
Good.
Okay, Councilor Newman.
I just wanted to thank you guys for cluing me in on the seventh penny, because I was trying to go back and see why it's failed or why it's always been on here. So I appreciate all your guys' feedback.
Absolutely. Councilors, anything else you want to add to this conversation? I have one question. Derek, we have had, we've made some pretty substantial changes to our code related to housing, but I'm curious what, in your office, you envision is sort of like what's coming, what's sort of like our next steps? Because it does feel like we have not realized some of the developments that utilize the changes in our code. I think there's maybe a few out there, but are there other things the council can be doing to make some progress on our that need for units?
Mayor, council, I think that the idea of housing remaining a goal is pretty valid. We know that the state is doing their own work. That's going to take our staff monitoring what possibly comes out of the state legislation, bills, anything that passes. That could mean changes at the local level, depending upon what's potentially approved or not approved. I think that we're going to see continued monitoring that we're going to need to do. How well are the things that we've done up until this point? What have they resulted in? Have we seen progress made? That monitoring is always important. And then I would just say that I don't think we're probably done. I think that we're going to always be working on housing, at least for the foreseeable future. Exactly what all those things are, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But we have some different ideas
Okay.
But I think it's very applicable to keep on there, and I think it'll be something that if we want to stay ahead of that curve, and if we want to try to be in the best position as possible and set us up for success versus being behind, I think it would be good to keep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I certainly support us keeping it. I was just curious if there were anything specific that we should have on there, and that maybe the council should be thinking on. One of the, arterial infrastructure, I heard that conversation. I think that would matter.
Arterial infrastructure, I think we've talked about in past work sessions about looking at fees and, how fees affect development.
Yeah.
But I think that arterial infrastructure, that's had a lot of interest by the state as well. And especially if they come up with some sort of funding mechanism, I think that'll be something that as a community we'll really want to try to figure out how we can achieve receiving some of that money, because we find that that's one of the largest impediments to any type of development, let alone just housing development. That infrastructure costs a lot of money. And if we can figure out a way to help with those costs, a lot of times projects can proceed forward with a lot less risk. So.
I would add too, Mayor, we've talked for many years, and I think the housing study addressed it as well, about council creating some, by ordinance, some latitude for staff to negotiate with developers for reduced fees based on certain housing, just housing period, but,
Sure. Housing
you
type.
can integrate into that types of housing, I guess. I don't want to talk about income restrictions or things
Sure.
like that. We're not a housing authority, but
Right.
types of housing to try to target specific populations, So that's something that literally has probably been on my to-do list for like 8 years, to figure out if the will is there for council to grant some, guidance and ordinance, but to allow us to negotiate reduction in fees in exchange for what we think we need.
Okay. And a few things that I've been thinking about relating to housing. I think a community land trust is an interesting idea. It won't live in the city, right? Like it wouldn't be a city board or commission. I think it needs to be separate as a nonprofit, but we may have a role in sort of facilitating it, because I think we would maybe have a real benefit in utilizing a land trust for part of our development. So portions of the Turner Track, portions of North 4th Street, things like that, I think could see a real benefit from having some sort of current and future affordability built into them. But the city shouldn't probably manage that affordability piece and the buying and selling of houses and the oversight, right? Because we also have that enforcement piece, and the city shouldn't be evicting people. That's a curiosity of mine. I think I would like to understand better what the city's role is in a land trust and how we might use that, even if that's just sort of like a land banking concept. And then the other piece that I've been curious about is if we may have code on this that I don't know about, but on vacancies, sort of like houses that are sitting empty for a year, 2 years, something like that. I mean, I just currently I moved to a new home and I'm living next to a house that's been sitting vacant for 3 years. Somebody could be living there quite easily, but the owner has chosen to just leave it vacant. It's overgrown. It looks rough all the time. So I continue to be interested in sort of like what mechanism we may use to push those back onto the market. I've read some about other communities, carrots and sticks for how to do that, but I'm interested in that because I do think there are more vacant properties than we expect, and maybe even more than before the rental regulations that we passed, because I think it became less advantageous for some folks to rent, so now those houses may just be vacant. So I'm interested in those two items. I don't know how the rest of council feels about it, but Councilor Shumway?
Thank you, Your Honor. There's a good example this year. The town of Shoshone took your concept, of having a land trust, and they did quite a bit of development and really enhanced the housing market in Shoshone. We probably ought to take a look at how they did it, what they had to do to make it happen.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you telling me about that.
Article.
Councilor Newman?
I like the vacant house idea as well, because I know a lot of, at least back home when I was there, a lot of them were using them as like tax write-offs because they were like lost income when we could be renting them out, so, or selling them, whatever the case is, right? So I would like to look at something like that as well at some point.
Cool. Vice Mayor?
I have a sister was director of housing, and I told her about the vacant house, et cetera thing. And she indicated that sometimes those are VA loans, and that if you have a VA loan, you're not allowed to rent it. And that sometimes if someone passes away, then they hold on to the property, and that the VA loan system they found in Florida just a number of empty, vacant houses that were actually owned by the VA loan system. And when they identified those, they were able to come in and do an offer. Often they don't sell because, she said, that they often don't sell because they couldn't pass inspection, but that what they did was negotiate with the VA to sell as is. And they were able to come in and get below market value and to do it in a whole different mechanism. So I wonder if with these vacant houses, we could do a little research to find out, why have they been vacant for 2 to 3 years? Is it because it can't pass inspection, so they don't put it on the market and they're just going to hold on to the property? And, so could there be ways that we could navigate that? So I thought I'd just pass that information on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It sounds very carrot heavy, less stick heavy.
Yeah.
Mr. Taney, please.
Yeah, Mayor, too, just one other item, just allowing, the city has done a good job, too, about using the properties that we do own to try to promote housing, and that we continue to do that. Specifically, we have North 4th Street, Turner Track properties, and so I think it's something we already do, but it kind of falls still in that whole broader housing creation, I guess. So just putting that out there as well.
Yeah.
So.
And one other thing, I'm realizing right now that I just told everybody, don't bring a lot of goals, and I'm like throwing 3 out in a row. So you can just ignore this if it doesn't strike anyone. But we've received a lot of communication about folks having maybe tense relationships with new owners of mobile home parks locally, and I don't know a solution to this problem, but I think it's worth us recognizing in our goals, because some of the behavior of the new sort of like corporate owners of the mobile home parks is it doesn't seem very ethical, and legal, sure, I imagine, but it doesn't seem like how we would want to treat folks in our community. So I don't know what we can do, but I think exploring that conversation would be worthwhile, ways that the city may intervene in some way to help those folks out. Anything else you all want to add? Councilor Gabriel? Oh, Councilor Doherty, please. Sorry, I just don't see.
I think what you were just talking about, Mr. Mayor, falls under the same heading as what the Vice Mayor was talking about predatory landlords. And so if we evaluate rentals, included in that would be, if we find out measures we can take to help people in mobile home parks, I think that would be the same goal in my mind.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you funneling that together. Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to add that I'm sorry. The City of Boulder settled today a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against a corporation for predatory practice, and then those monies will be returned to the people that the individuals within the community that have suffered due to that practice. But I think it was like a $10 million settlement on predatory practice in Colorado today.
Well, timely. Thank you. Councilor Gabriel, sorry about that.
I just noticed the other day on Buford Street, there was a double wide that had just gone in, and an older mobile home was taken out a couple of months ago, and so it was vacant. But it really dressed up that area, very well done, and just, glad to see that happen in that particular area, because it was very attractive.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Councilor Newman?
So I live across the street from one, and they just took one out and like beautified it up too, and they put some sort of requirement out that they had to like update the exterior of the mobile homes. So there's people putting up new siding and really cleaning it up because I guess there's a lot of work going on in our neighborhood too with the storm drain, and so I think they're trying to bring in more. So there are some good mobile home parks that aren't taking advantage of people around here too. And if we can get some good ideas from them to incorporate into some of that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think we can have this conversation some other time, I suppose, but I'm thinking as well about, if you're living in a mobile home that has siding that's falling off, you probably don't have the $5,000 to put in new siding. I don't know what it would cost, imaginary money, to put in the new siding, right? And so now you're being forced to on an asset that is depreciating and you can't move it, right? Because it's not legal to move it. And it would, you're sort of you're trapped. And so your only asset in a lot of cases is trapped, and now you're having to improve it or, I'd heard anecdotes of folks having to rehouse their dogs, put in new fencing because the fencing material wasn't what the company wanted. And all the while sort of rent increases or lot fee increases monthly, 6 months, or annually, that are sort of substantial. So, I think we maybe weigh that somehow. Sure. Councilor Pierce?
I think it's more of a statewide issue as well. I mean, I've heard with friends who live in different communities across the state, Rock Springs, Green River, experiencing the very same thing. Riverton, Lander area as well. So it's not just us. And so maybe, sometimes we trailblaze on things and sometimes we don't, but I think it's certainly worth a conversation at the state level, seriously, too.
Yeah, and we may be quite limited on things we can do, right?
Yeah.
So I think, you're probably right. All right, anything else on this topic, council members? Okay, we're going to move on to environmental stewardship. Anyone have anything here? Councilor O'Doherty, I was just waiting for your hand to come up.
I would like to adopt the language that what the city manager put in there about, because the carbon emissions reduction plan that Ms. Sheska's been working on, it enumerates steps we could take. So I think we could replace milestone A with the city manager's suggestion about that carbon emissions plan. But so that's my point there.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do, the city as an entity, to help individual level transitioning to solar power. I know that there's monies coming down that will allow people rebates and various things to weatherize homes, to establish solar. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate individuals toward that type of goal toward accessing that and being able to weatherize or solarize, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the things I had been thinking about in this topic as well was, we had that presentation about the grant application, and the bottleneck seemed to be that there wasn't going to be enough contractors to do the work in the time allotted. I was wondering if there was some way the city could engage in that conversation as well to start trying to get, I don't know how we enter the conversation of sort of like job training, whether that's a thing a local government does, but, and I don't expect the state will be taking on that issue. So I'm not sure if there's anything we could do, but I would be interested in how we could sort of begin training folks or have conversations to sort of like grease the wheels there. Vice Mayor?
I'm just wondering if that might be a conversation that we could have within Town and Gown and with LCCC about offering programs that would lead to job training.
Good idea.
Yeah, invite workforce development, because they may have a whole bunch of data to show the need. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and
Please, City Manager, and then I'll come to you.
our application that we've joined with BEF and the Wyoming Energy Authority will, I'm fading a little bit here. Our application with BEF will have the potential, as I understand, for residential level solar. And that partnership is with the Wyoming Energy Authority. Part of their objective is to be able to identify workforce development. So we've got big partners in that collaboration that are bigger than us and can probably, that also will be working to address those issues you just mentioned.
Great. I'm going to go to Councilor Richardson, Councilor Pierce.
I believe there's also more emphasis at the community college level on trades, and so perhaps it's a conversation we could have with the community college here in town to see if that is something that could be implemented. I know it's been a big focus at the state level, and feels like it would be a natural fit for everything that we're working toward, even if it doesn't quite align with what normally happens at the state level in terms of solar.
Sure. Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, and just to add to Micah's earlier comment about using our media networking or social networking to get that information out there and share some of that would be great.
That sounds great. Anyone else have anything in environmental stewardship? The only other goal that I had in mind was for the council to I suppose complete and implement the staffing study that we have. I think that should be on our goals as well, to see that through.
Yes.
Councilor Newman?
I do like all the suggested ones, especially the budget ones, since I did meet with Director Wade, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, talking about this exact thing. So I know we haven't mentioned any of the suggested ones, so I wanted to make sure that it was brought into the conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, and I'm going to take the silence on that. In general, the silence to be council members didn't really object, if that's okay.
They can just roll it in there.
Yeah, that those can be included. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mayor, do you mind if I just recap? So you mentioned the staffing study, and then I couldn't quite hear you, Councilor Newman, what you added to that?
Councilor Newman was just saying your sort of like the goals that you listed, that the council was favorable to those, or that he was favorable, I should say. And then I said, unless anyone objects, we're going to say the council's favorable. So those can be rolled in. Anything else council members want to add to the goals? Council members, we might beat our 9 o'clock hard stop. City Manager, is there anything else that you had in mind to wrap this work session up? Yeah, please. Oh, thank you, City Clerk. Councilor Doherty, I'm really sorry. Yeah, all I see is the screen, so I apologize.
I would like us to have, well, I was going to ask, I think we can get rid of milestone C, the aquifer protection plan has been, that's on its way, right? So now we don't have to have that as one of our milestones. But then in terms of reducing waste, I would love to do a pilot project like containerized composting. And it doesn't have to show as a goal, but I ask about, the funding for that. Could we pursue some containerized composting effort, perhaps with the Feeding Laramie Valley or Interfaith, so that something that doesn't require a lot of staff, but these containerized vessels, so they're like in the neighborhood of, I think, $20,000 to $40,000. So even though the reduction plan talks about the landfill in the future, we really have a lot of people interested in composting in Laramie. And I would love for us to have some kind of pilot program to increase composting, and maybe just home composting. So I don't know that it has to be a milestone, but I think it would fall under that reducing solid waste. And I hope you all will consider maybe a pilot project like that for the containerized. So it's like a shipping container, and it's automated. And anyway, just
Yeah, that sounds great.
hoping people would consider that.
Yeah, that sounds great, Councilor Doherty. I certainly think that's worth exploring. One note I would say on milestone C, we would want to continue the portion that says establish city ordinances necessary to enforce the plan after it's adopted. We would want to keep that portion, I suppose, unless council's taking a wild turn. But all right. I think, does anybody have anything else? We're going to go to the public on this work session. Any member of the public wishing to speak can go ahead and raise their hands. Come forward in the room. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period and move on to council comments and updates. Councilor Gabriel, anything from you?
I'm thinking, caught me kind of off guard.
Started on the other side. I'd normally
Yes,
start over there.
I was not prepared. I was looking at Councilor Shumway and trying to figure out what's going through his mind. I'm sure he's thinking about sports. Let's see. I'm going to pass.
Okay. Councilor Richardson.
DDA met tonight and is still considering moving forward with doing some sort of planning to help them kind of find a course. They were also introduced to a potential grant opportunity, and so had some good discussion on that. And Main Street completed all of their kind of winter festival sorts of things and is moving, gung-ho into 2024, so.
Councilor Gabriel.
I just thought of something, if you're done.
Yeah, go for it.
The Vice Mayor and I will be interviewing 4 applicants tomorrow morning for the Police Advisory Board, since we had a resignation. And I know we have 4 excellent candidates.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilor Gabriel. Thank you for doing that.
What do you counsel for you?
Councilor Newman.
Yeah, I wasn't there, so.
Oh, that's right, I
Yeah,
didn't do that.
I wasn't at youth council. I had to miss it due to work, so.
Okay. Well, if Councilor Shumway doesn't have it, we're coming back to you, Councilor Richardson. Okay. Vice Mayor?
The Laramie Police Advisory Board, the board has completed their 30 hours of training, which was very informative, well done. And since we will be having a new member come onto the board, they will be replicating the training for that person. And I spoke with the chief, and any members of council who are interested in participating in that training, if you'll just contact Chief Brown, he will work with you to get you into doing that training if you're interested. At the meeting, they accepted Linda Devine's resignation, and we did some review of the process of internal investigations. We will be meeting every other month for the board. The board will be meeting every other month for their business. And then on the even months, we'll meet for training. So the board will meet every month, 1 month for the meeting, 1 month for training, because the training is ongoing in order to be on the board. Planning Commission met last night. They accepted the resignation of Sharon Buccino, and we are trying to fill that position. If you know of any people, please encourage them to submit an application. The primary focus of the meeting last night was a variance request for the parking lot at the Pilot Hill Trailhead, which would include gravel and landscaping for 65 vehicles, 4 buses, which would allow the school system to bring the kids up there for field trips, et cetera, and 4 horse trailers. There were a number of questions asked and explored, but in the end, the committee voted 6 yes, 0 no in favor of the parking lot. I met today with at the Albany Advisory Council on Trafficking for a noontime lunch. And there were representatives from the airport were there, since that's a location where some of that trafficking occurs, the sheriff's department, the police chief. There were a number of community members that were present. It was just a general presentation, similar to the one that we've already received, but they are continuing with their outreach, training, and intervention work and strategies. And that's it for me. We do, as Councilor Gabriel said, he and I will be interviewing with 4 people to fill the spot on the Police Advisory Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I don't have much by way of updates. Civil Service Commission meets tomorrow at 3. So no update there until 2 weeks from now. And then Pilot Hill Board will meet on the 17th. And same day as the airport, which I will be attending moving forward. I'll probably miss this meeting, but I'm going to hop into those meetings moving forward. And then I just wanted to thank the staff again for hanging out all evening. This is probably not the way you always want to spend your Tuesdays, but we sure appreciate you being here. Councilor Pierce. Go ahead.
No updates at this time. The ranch group is meeting Friday, so.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Councilor Shumway?
Thank you, Mayor. The Traffic Safety Commission postponed their meeting until this Thursday at 3:30, so I'll be meeting with them on Thursday. The Laramie Youth Council did meet, and Councilor Richardson and I went with them. They started off at the Interfaith and did a tour of Interfaith, and then came to the annex, and where they discussed their goals and objectives. They are very active and very focused on what they're going to do. We're now going to have another tour in February of the soup kitchen, and I think we'll probably end up with another tour in March of perhaps the downtown clinic. But they're very, and they also have shown interest in going over to the state legislature and to observe what they do there. They're very engaged, and I appreciate working with them. That's all I have.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Doherty?
The Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities met last Tuesday, and the commission is very interested in the walk survey that was done in Cheyenne by the AARP and the county city councilor and volunteers, and we're thinking that might be a good thing for Laramie to replicate for Disability Awareness Month, which is in March. And if the city already has all that information, but could use some field verification, that might be a good use of that. And so they'll be asking for a proclamation for Disability Awareness Month for March. And of course, sidewalks are always an issue, and snow removal. So folks are very excited to learn about the volunteer app possibilities and the snow angel idea. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, folks, we're going to move on to agenda review. You'll see that not in hard copy. It's only, I believe, on the packet. Unless I'm crazy, which that's okay. Everybody can squeeze in if you're sitting next to somebody with a computer. There it is. It's a pretty short agenda, council members. Take some time to look through it, but I would note a few items of interest. Item 15, which is about compensation for elected officials, that may get pushed a little bit. I'm not entirely sure yet. So you'll have some update by Friday on that one, on what, would be sort of included in that, because there's some sort of like conversation happening about what is allowable.
Thousands and thousands.
Yeah, we'll all be wealthy. All right. And then you'll see, obviously, adopting our goals is on that meeting there at the very end. A couple grant applications. And the subdivision is more straightforward than you may imagine. It is sort of just a requirement of code that they do this, so. Any questions, concerns? Okay, that we can't have conversations about between now and then? Great. All right, council members, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Mr. Mayor. Good job. Thanks for coming, everybody.